All right, let's dive into one of the most fundamental questions there is. How does life, well, make more life? It's a story that's got everything from perfect copies to a high-stakes genetic lottery. So let's get right into it.
I mean, think about it for a second. Why aren't you a carbon copy of one of your parents? You've got some of their traits, for sure, but you're a totally unique mix. The answer to that question? Well, that's the key to understanding just about everything about how life survives and changes.
So where do we find that answer? It's not in some old book. No, it's written deep, deep inside yourselves. It's the biological code that makes you, you. We're talking about the blueprint for every living thing, DNA. And this brings us to the absolute core idea, genetic variation. These aren't huge, dramatic changes we're talking about. They're tiny, subtle differences in the DNA code that make every single one of us and every plant, every animal, one of a kind. This right here is the engine that drives all of life. So, how does this variation even happen? Well, every single time a cell divides, it has to make a perfect copy of its entire DNA blueprint. But here's the thing, just like an old photocopier, the process isn't always perfect. Tiny, random errors, little glitches, you could say, can creep in. And that's it. That's how new traits can pop up from one generation to the next. And you have to understand, these so-called glitches aren't a bug in the system. They are the single most important feature for survival. This variation is what lets a species survive a new disease or adapt when the climate suddenly changes. It's the very thing that drives evolution over millions of years. At the end of the day, it's life's ultimate survival strategy. Okay, so we know why variation is king. But how does life actually go about reproducing in the first place? Let's start with the simplest, most direct method. Before all the complex mixing and matching of genes, life just made copies of itself. And this is called asexual reproduction. It's super fast, it's really efficient, and you only need one parent. The catch? The offspring are basically clones, genetically almost identical to the parent. Think of it like life's original copy and paste function. And life has gotten incredibly creative with this whole cloning thing. You've got an amoeba that can just split itself in two, that's fission, or Spirogyra, an alga that can break into pieces, and each little piece just regrows into a whole new organism. A hydra can literally grow a little bud that just pops off to start a new life, and we've all seen bread mold use spores to spread absolutely everywhere. It's a whole toolbox of cloning strategies. So this all sounds pretty great, right? It's fast, it's simple, which leads to a really big question. If making quick copies is so effective, why did life ever bother evolving a more complicated method? Why isn't everything on Earth just cloning itself? Well, the answer is that while cloning is super efficient, it's not very adaptable. If the environment changes, all the clones could be wiped out. So for long-term survival, life developed a much more powerful strategy, a kind of genetic lottery that creates endless new possibilities. And this chart really lays out the trade-off perfectly. See, on one hand, you have asexual reproduction. One parent, super fast, but very low genetic variation, which means it's not great at adapting. On the other hand, you have sexual reproduction. It's slower, yeah, and it needs two parents, but the payoff is huge. Incredibly high genetic variation, which gives a species a massive advantage when things get tough. Here's probably the best way to think about it. If asexual reproduction is like a photocopier, making the same copy over and over, sexual reproduction is like taking two totally different decks of cards, shuffling them together, and dealing a completely new, unique hand every single time. Every offspring is a new combination, a new roll of the dice. So what makes this whole genetic shuffle possible? Special little cells called gametes. These are the cards in our analogy. Each one, like a sperm or an egg, carries exactly half of a parent's genetic deck, all ready to be combined with another half from another parent. Okay, so we've got these gametes, these genetic half-decks. How do they actually, meet up and get shuffled? Let's look at a perfect example that we see all around us every day, flowering plants. It all goes down inside the flower. You have the male part, the stamen, and its job is to produce pollen, and that pollen contains the male gametes. Then you have the female part, the pistil, which holds the ovules or eggs safely inside its ovary. And this is where an incredible journey begins. First, a grain of pollen lands on the pistil. Then, that pollen grain grows a tiny tube, tunneling all the way down into the ovary.
The male gamete travels down that tube and fuses with an egg. That's fertilization. From there, that fertilized egg develops into a seed, and the ovary around it swells up and becomes a fruit. So yeah, every apple, every cherry you've ever eaten started out just like this. Okay, now let's bring this whole story home and look at how these exact same principles work in our own species. The fundamentals are the same, two parents, shuffling genes, but the process, well, it's uniquely human. For us, the story really kicks into high gear at puberty. This is that time of life when a flood of hormones triggers a whole cascade of changes, basically switching on our reproductive systems. It's the biological starting gun that makes us capable of creating the next generation. So when a male gamete, a sperm cell, successfully meets and fertilizes a female gamete, an egg cell, they fuse to form a zygote. And this is an incredible moment. This is the very first cell of a brand new, genetically unique person containing a complete and totally novel blueprint for life. And from that one single cell, an unbelievable transformation begins. Over the next 9 months, that zygote divides and divides, becoming an embryo that implants itself into the wall of the uterus. By about week 9, all the basic structures are there, and we call it a fetus. From that point on, it's all about growth and refinement, until, around 40 weeks later, a fully formed human being is ready to be born. What's just amazing here is how proactive this whole system is. The female body isn't just sitting around waiting. As the textbook says, every single month, the uterus actively prepares a rich, nourishing home, just on the off chance that a fertilized egg might arrive. So when you really step back and look at the big picture, all of it, the complexities of puberty, of fertilization, of pregnancy, it's all in service of that one single guiding principle we started with, creating variation. It's life's most sophisticated and highest stakes method for shuffling the genetic deck. And that's a wild thought, isn't it? Every single organism alive today, including you, represents a successful variation, a winning hand in this continuous genetic lottery. You are a link in an unbroken chain of reproduction that stretches back almost 4 billion years. Which leaves us with one last big question. What wonders, what new solutions, what new forms of life will the next shuffle of the deck, the next variation, create?